Welcome. Okay, we have the Public Safety and Justice Affairs Committee meeting this Tuesday, February 16th. Roll call, please.
Calling the roll, Mr. Gallagher.
Here.
Mr. Greenspan. Here. Mr. Germana. Mr. Germana is absent. Mr. Harrison. Mr. Harrison is absent. Ms. Conwell.
Here.
There is a quorum. Also like the record to reflect that Councilman Miller is in attendance.
Welcome, Mr. Miller. Public comment related to the agenda.
No, Mr. Chair, no one is signed in.
In your packet, we have the minutes of February 2nd. If they're in order, I'll accept the motion of approval.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Against? Thank you. Resolution 2016-0040.
Resolution number 2016-0040, making awards on requisition number 34757 to various providers for staff secure and secure shelter care services for the period 3/1/2016 through 2/28/2018.
Who's here to speak on? Didn't even have to call Ms. Lipman up. And again, on this dreary, blurry kind of a day, the light from the Juvenile Justice Center has arrived.
Good afternoon to everyone. I'm here to present a contract. We did a request for proposal process for our staff secure shelter care program. And we had two vendors that came back with proposals, and we're recommending that we contract with both of them, Carrington Youth Academy and Cleveland Christian Home. Carrington Youth Academy has about 35 beds that we use on a daily basis, and Cleveland Christian Home has 10 beds, and Cleveland Christian Home only takes boys. So if we have any girls that need that service, they have to go to Carrington Youth Academy. And we have general fund and Title IV-E funds that are utilized for this program. It's almost a 50-50 split on the funding that we need for it. So it's about $1.2 million from our Title IV-E funds that we're estimating that we need. The shelter care program takes a lot of the burden off of our detention center, so it is an important program that we have. It's part of that detention continuum. And so we have the 45 beds available. Last year in 2015, our average daily population was about 34 beds. So there might be a little bit of room in that budget, but just in case we need the space, we'd like to have the money for the space since the money is encumbered to the contract.
Okay. Where is Carrington located?
It's in East Cleveland.
East Cleveland, and Cleveland Christians
West side. It's on the west side, exactly.
Okay. Questions? Oh, I'm sorry, ma'am.
Everybody.
I thought you said this way.
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
Karen, you said 35 beds daily used for the Carrington, but you didn't. You said 10 beds for the Cleveland Christian Home, but is that used on a daily basis as well?
Yes. So our average daily population out of the 45 beds is about 34 beds. So, but because Carrington Cleveland Christian Home won't take girls, so any girls would have to go to Carrington.
Okay, and my second question, you stated that this was funded by the Title IV-E funds. Is that solely? Or?
No, and
okay.
general fund. So general fund, our budget in the general fund has been constant for, I can't tell you how long, and that's $1.3 million. And then there's about $1.2 million that we're estimating from Title IV-E funds for this as well.
So 1.3 and
1.2, right? So the way we come up with those amounts is just assuming that we're going to use every bed every day. Carrington's per diem is $158 per night. Cleveland Christian Home is $157.94. So basically, you take 365 times the per diem times the 10 beds or the 35 beds, and figure out how much money that you actually need, so you can encumber that to the contract.
All right, thank you.
Anyone else, Mr. Greenspan?
Yes, sorry, just a question. You said general fund, but the legislation is HHS. funds, which is the
Oh,
funding
my
source?
bad. I'm sorry. It is HHS.
Okay, all right, thank you.
I'm sorry. That was my mistake.
Mr. Miller.
Do we have a current contract for these services, and who are the providers, and when does it expire?
Yes, we have a current contract. The providers are the same providers, and it expires on February 29th.
And how many beds are provided for in the current contract?
The same number of beds, actually. It's 35 beds and 10 beds. And then the one thing I didn't mention about the funding is this is funding for 1 year, so we'll be back in a year with an amendment to add the second year funds, the HH funds from the 2017 fiscal year. We'll be back to add those in.
And since you said you're not using the full bed capacity, is there money left over from the current contract, and what's going to happen to that money?
There may be money. I haven't looked at it because we haven't gotten all of our February bills yet, and I'm not sure if our January bills are paid. So it's going to be March or April before we pay all of the bills and make sure everything is cleaned up before we will be able to look and see if there's any money left on the current contract. The last time I looked, actually, there's really very, very little left, if anything. I don't think there's any HHS money left. There may be some Title IV money left, and then that would just go back to the Title IV account.
Well, if you're only using an average of 33 out of 45 beds, and the contract amount is predicated on it being filled, why would there not be a substantial amount of money left over?
Because there are times where, other than that, we have actually more than 45 kids in there. So it ebbs and flows a little bit. It depends on the space available. There are times where of the 45 total beds, there may be 47 kids in there, and then there are times when there's less. So we like to be prepared, and especially with the Republican convention coming up. We don't really know what impact that's going to have on our detention center. So we like to be able to have the money encumbered into that contract. Otherwise, we'd have to come back. We'd have to do an amendment. We'd have to go through the process to add the money to pay the invoices. And so this way the money is there for us so that we can pay our vendors in a timely fashion.
Where it says staff secure and secure shelter care services, are those two different programs or one program?
They are two different programs, although we did not have anybody who responded to the to the secure shelter care. So this is staff secure, which is what we've traditionally had for years and years at juvenile court. We didn't have anybody who responded to the secure shelter care program, so that's not a program that we're going to be moving forward with at this time.
And what would be the difference between staff secure and secure shelter?
Secure shelter would have locked doors. Staff secure usually has bars so the kids can actually get out, but the staff keep them in place, or so they can't. Technically, a kid can walk out of a staff secure shelter care.
And have we had any of that happen?
Yes, it has happened. There are kids that will just walk out, and then they are generally charged with usually an escape charge associated with that.
Okay. Yes, ma'am.
The invoices, how often are the invoices paid?
They're monthly. They're monthly, and it's based on just actual usage.
Okay. And going on the point of children can walk out, what is tacked on to their sentence if they escape? What is the
Well, these are generally, these youth are pre-adjudication youth. So this is for the vast majority of these kids. They're in a shelter care facility to ensure that they meet their next court hearing. Like I said, it's part of that detention continuum. So this is not a sentence, nor is it a treatment facility at all. So they may be charged with an escape, or depending on the circumstances around what's going on and what the prosecutor determines that they want to charge if a youth walks out. Sometimes they walk out and they come back. Sometimes they walk out and go home.
Do they most of the times appear in court if they walked out?
It depends. I mean, sometimes they'll walk out and run away.
All right, thank you.
Mr. Greenspan.
Thanks. Just one more question that came up on the funding. So I understand the two funding sources, but you made a statement that the Title 4E funding, that we maybe have spent the HHS levy funding, but the 4E funding might have a balance left in it. How do you delineate the use of funds when? Does Title 4E funding say you have to use HHS first, then us? Or how are they not running out at the same pace, since we're almost 50-50 on the funding source?
We generally use the HHS funds first.
Okay, why?
Well, it's partly because we used to have three funding sources in shelter care. We used to have HHS and reclaim funds, and then Title 4E was sort of the last pot of funds that we would use. And because of supplanting rules, we had to use HHS in the first part of the year and then the reclaim funds in the first part of the state fiscal year. So that's always how we've been running the money, is that the first part of the year would be utilizing the HHS funds so that we wouldn't run into supplanting rules in using reclaim funds. This state fiscal year, our reclaim funds were cut by about half in our variable, so we don't have any funds to put into that. So we just have the two funding sources. So we started off just using the HHS funds. We also don't have a lot of Title 4E funds, and when they're gone, they're gone.
Right, but if 48% are 4E funds, correct? I
Yeah.
have to look, right? If 48%, why don't we use that first, and then supplement the Health and Human Services? Then what's ever left goes back to the Health and Human Service Fund.
Well, that's a decision that the court has made, to use the HHS funds that are allocated in this budget first for this purpose, and use the 4E funds as a supplement for it. So, because the HHS funds are not funded at a level that meets the need of the court, and hasn't been for a very long time.
So the court made the decision how to appropriate the funds, meaning which funding stream to use.
Right,
when.
like when we had three funding streams, we had to use HHS first.
I know, but now we have two.
Which really just came about really in the last few months. We determined that our reclaim funds aren't going to meet our needs, and we had to redo our reclaim budget. So but we had already started using those HHS funds.
What happens if we don't use all the 4E funding?
It goes back to the 4E account.
So that's my point. Why don't we use it first?
Because the court made a determination to use the HHS funds first.
All right, well, that just sounds like a discussion between the county and the court. But there's no restriction that 4E funding must be used first, is there?
No, do you mean? No, there's no restriction of what. Okay. Without the reclaim funds in place, there's no restriction. But the Title 4E funds wouldn't keep up. I mean, our revenue coming in would never keep up with the usage. We would run out of 4E funds and then have no 4E funds.
But then it could be backfilled by the HHS levy fund.
No, the HHS levy funds go back every year. Would go back to the county.
Yeah, right.
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 And then the court would have no Title 4E funds for any of the purposes that we use Title 4E funds for.
So 4E funds that aren't used you retain them?
We retain them and use them. For example, a lot of 4E funds are going to be used to supplement what we are missing in reclaim. Okay. So, I mean, and those are all youth services.
So do you have 4E? So the 4E funds that come in, they have multiple uses. Is what we can use them for.
Right. They can be used for a number of things, but it's always the court's determination how to use those funds. Okay. But the best practice is never to allocate more than you have revenue coming in the previous year. We don't have $1.2 million coming in a year.
So the 4E funds, okay, so I think I'm starting to see this more clearly. The 4E funds effectively are under the court's discretion. They don't come to the council or county for approval. Well, now I understand why they use that money first, because I mean use the HHS levy fund money first. So if you have a surplus in the 4E funding, you carry it over as opposed to HHS levy.
Correct. It's a special revenue fund. Correct.
Okay. I see some discussions being had as a result of this. Because I think Mr. Kraus knows where I'm going. Okay, Mr. You understand? Mm-hmm. Okay, all right, thank you.
Through the chair to Ms. Littman, you said the Title 4E funds runs out, and you said then they'll be gone. Is there an annual? How do we get the Title 4 funds in the first place?
So Title 4E, which is part of the Social Security Act, there's two different pots of money. There's administrative and maintenance. So maintenance comes from when we have a youth that is considered Title 4E eligible and goes to a residential placement, and then we use the SACWIS system, and there's a percentage of funds that then comes back to the court for those youth for the bed days that they use in that residential facility, which is why when we do contracts for residential facilities, they must be Title 4E eligible because they have to be certified by the state agencies to have a Title 4E rate. And then we only contract for Title 4E rates so that we are eligible to get those funds, a portion of those funds returned for those youth. The other portion is administrative, which has a couple pieces in it that we contract with an agency that helps us figure it out because it's pretty detailed. So you get funding for administrative functions that work towards working with youth that are Title 4E eligible. So, for example, probation officers, some administrative staff and such. And then you do quarterly. They fill out this form that you get a percentage of money back. And so those are the two, maintenance and administrative are the two Title 4E accounts that make up the Title 4E fund. Those funds coming in, the last 2 years our revenue has been about $1 million a year. But we've been utilizing those funds. Every year we use them for something, so we don't really have a lot of those funds left over to utilize. So we don't want to allocate, which we're going to have to because of the budget cuts this year, but we don't like allocating more than what we get in the previous year. It's been about the last 2 years. I think it was about $1 million each year in revenue.
So for the administrative use, you said it could be used for probation officers and things.
No, not use. That's what goes into the formula that figures out what the revenue is.
Okay.
So the administrative functions that work on keeping youth, essentially keeping youth in their home, and so that probation officers is the easiest thing to look at. And then there's like a time study that they have to do, so you pull a percentage of their time that they actually are working on Title 4E youth activities. There's some other pieces that go into it, whether there's a space maintenance piece, and then there's some other administrative functions, and it's sort of a whole long worksheet, and that is a quarterly function that happens so that we can pull down those administrative funds. And then the maintenance comes from the youth that are taken out of the home into residential placements.
Okay, any way we can get reclaimed funds again?
We would love to get more reclaim funds.
Did that came from the federal government? The
reclaim is state.
State.
It's from the Ohio Department of Youth Services. So the reclaim funds, there's two pots of that. One is youth services, which is based on the population. So every 10 years that changes. That's $1.6 million a year. And so that is the same that we get every year. And then the variable, which is determined based on our bed day usage at the Department of Youth Services. It's a formula, and the number of felony adjudications that we have in a year. So, and then that pot of funds for the state is capped at $30.6 million, so that each county is then in competition with every other county. So in Cuyahoga County, last state fiscal year, our variable, that pot of reclaim funds, was $1.5 million. This year, it's $800,000. So we have to make up that difference somehow, somewhere. So that may come from Title IV refunds as well.
So we did get the reclaim.
We got reclaim, but it's about $800,000, $850,000. So it was cut in half. And when you look at all of the counties, there's some counties that have $3 or $4 million that they're getting in that. And Cuyahoga, who has by far the largest number of felony adjudications and the highest number of youth that are committed to Department of Youth Services, gets a very, very small percentage of the overall $30.6 million. So anything that any of you in council want to do to help the judges to appeal to the Department of Youth Services to look at their formula and reformulate that so that it is more equitable based on where the need really is, we would really welcome that.
So what happened with the $800,000 of reclaim funds?
That is allocated. So the reclaim funds go to primarily to youth services. So things like substance abuse assessment, sex offender assessment and treatment, substance abuse treatment, in-home family therapy, a couple different kinds of in-home family therapy.
But you were saying, but I'm just trying to get it clear.
Yeah.
So the $800,000 of reclaim funds you utilize for something else, but it used to be more where you could use it for something else.
Where we could budget,
Okay.
we can budget a piece of it for shelter care funds as well. This year, because that was cut in half, we don't have enough, so we had to cut back. There's also probably about 47 staff that are paid for out of reclaim funds.
But going back to your point, you said the state caps it at 30.6 for
The state.
for all
For the
of
whole
Ohio.
state, yes.
And how did they come up with the figure that we only were to receive $800,000?
That it's formula driven, which I can email you the whole formula because it's a
so
little
that
bit
means
complicated.
our numbers went down in what we needed.
It's kind of a competition between the counties. So the formula is based on.
Okay. So it didn't matter that our needs stayed the same.
It did not matter that our needs stayed the same, which pretty much our reclaim plan, the services that we were requesting were almost identical to what we had requested the previous year. It had nothing to do with need. It had to do with this formula driven that and the number of bed day credits that we used and then the number of felony adjudications that we had.
Do we have the staff or the capability to find out, since we were shorted half of what we usually received, who it went to?
Yeah, I mean, I can show you. I have the whole list of every county, the allocation that they had for what's called variable or reclaim funds, their allocation for youth services, which is based on population. And you can look at it, and you'll see a lot of counties that are, to be perfectly honest, that are a lot smaller population-wise than Cuyahoga County, probably got 3, 4, 5 times more than Cuyahoga.
And the numbers of the individuals being served wasn't greater or less, or?
No, it's not about, no, I mean, I can tell you the numbers being served are less because their county's much, much smaller. It's just it's a formula-driven.
This formula system's terrible.
It's interesting. It's interesting. So
it's in mental health too. It's in a lot of arenas. Okay.
But if you're interested, I mean, I have oodles and oodles and oodles of information on reclaim in the formula and how to figure it out, and just let me know, and I'm happy to just email you all that information.
So next year, hopefully, in 2017, we could possibly get more.
We can, but we're looking at, when I looked at where we are right now compared to the other counties, we're probably going to get less.
Less than what we received this year?
Yep. We're probably looking at, if we get the same, I would be shocked. We're probably looking at anywhere between $400,000 and $500,000 for our variable.
Okay.
And that push is going to have to come out of our legislators, right? Mr. Greenspan, did you have something? And Mr. Miller?
Yeah, thank you. So I'm just getting back to this whole 4E formula scenario here. Can we get a report, I don't know if it's OBM or if it's you, that gives us exactly how much 4E funding the juvenile court receives, its uses, and then either general fund or HHS or other funding source participation kind of per program? I wonder if you have a report that has like a program, funding sources, 4E, reclaim, general, HHS, other sources. Do you have a report like that?
No, I could clearly get you out of 4E the funds that came in and what it was and what we used it for.
Okay.
Is that helpful?
Yeah. Does it show any other county participation? Like would it show this participation ratio 46 or 48-52? Meaning, so if the program's three million, rounding numbers, 3 million, let's even say $1 million, and 48% is 4E, so it would show 480,000 4E funding, 520,000 Health and Human Service levy funding. Do you have something that illustrates that?
So just for shelter care?
I'm looking all now. You've opened my eyes to all 4E funding, because I think I understand what the court's doing, but based on where we are and the economies of where we are, I'd like to be able to see exactly the allocations going forward and what money. Do you know how much money 4E money carried over from last year?
Right now, we have probably $4.7 million.
Of carryover?
It's not carryover. It's sort of a special revenue account, so it's sort of an ongoing account. Okay. Either you use it or you maintain it.
You maintain it. You don't lose it.
Right.
So you had 4.7 to start the year that was undedicated?
No, some of that is encumbered to different contracts for different uses.
But some is not.
Okay.
Yeah, that'd be great to have all that information.
Okay.
Is that something you can give us, or does OBM?
Yeah, I mean, I can get it for 4E, and then, for example, I know we used, how much of that? Probably $750,000 for residential treatment last year. And then there's some other smaller uses that we used it for.
Because here's where I'm going. We obviously know the court especially juvenile court, asked for more money than we were able to find in the budget. But if we're able to work together, if you've got 4.7 million or even half of that's able to be used for other purposes, that we may be able to free up some Health and Human Service levy dollars, which then could free up some general fund dollars, there may be an opportunity to help the entire scenario, instead of everybody sheltering or holding money so tight to the vest that we're actually hurting everyone instead of helping. Do you understand where?
No, I understand what you're saying, but I know that the court, because of the cuts that we received this year, that I'll be honest, I'm not sure how we're going to be able to even pay for general operating at the court this year, with the funds that we got.
But you might not. My point is,
we're going to have to. So when we went through the budget process, the court donated $750,000 to the budget and said, we will right now tell you $750,000 of our Title IV funds will go towards expenses that were previously paid for out of either general fund or HHS funds. And then our budget went down $750,000.
My point is, if there was an open discussion about the availability to use these funds in different ways and different formulas, you might not have had a budget cut. As a matter of fact, you might have actually had some of the increase that was requested, because we would all be thinking collectively for the better good instead of withholding funds because of either this example or other examples. That's kind of my point, and it triggers me to wonder how much other money, whether it's your court or other courts or other agencies, whether it's the Adams Board. I'm not being discriminatory against the courts in this discussion. How much other money is available that if we start thinking as one entity, instead of competing silos, complaining and throwing stones at each other, how much better we could all be. And I think there could have been an opportunity here, and I'm thinking of this on the surface, there could have been an opportunity possibly not to have cuts in the court, in the juvenile court in particular, if we'd have known the 4E funding could have been available to help offset some of the issues that the county's dealing with, so that there wouldn't have been cuts at all and maybe increases in the court's budget.
So are you saying that if we would have used 4E funds up front, that we wouldn't have had a budget cut?
I don't know the answer to that, but it's starting to spark the discussion in my mind, and I'm only a committee of one when I make that statement, that there could have been an opportunity if somebody's putting money aside and not really being open to discussing uses for that money that are applicable, then yeah, maybe there could have been an opportunity for there not to be some of the cuts that we're seeing, because you're able to redirect those funds in other areas. I'm just throwing it out there. I don't know the answer to it, but I'm just being alerted to how this 4E funding works. I wasn't aware that the courts were effectively holding money aside.
Well, we're not just sort of squirreling it away. We're using it to meet the needs of the court that we that otherwise aren't being funded by the general fund or HHS funding.
Some of it, but you said the 4.7, not all of it is dedicated. So I'm curious how much is undedicated, unencumbered, that could possibly be used in other ways.
So, I mean, I can tell you right now, of that 4.7, 1.2 is going to shelter care. There's probably maybe $750,000 that's probably going to go to residential treatment.
But don't you continuously get 4E funding coming in?
Not to that level, where we would be allocating more money than we have revenues coming in the previous year.
I'm just saying, I just think it'd be healthy to have it as part of the discussion. I'm not saying that you would have been fully restored and everything would have been great, but I'm not aware it was even part of any discussion. And I'm just curious if it was, what the outcome might have been.
Right, so it was, because it was what the court presented as part of our budget reductions, is that we put in what we would do with our 4E funds. That was part of our presentation to you.
Right.
So,
but it wasn't all. It wasn't everything.
No, it wasn't everything, but it was part of the conversation at that time.
Okay. All right. I'll talk to Mr. Kennedy and Mr. Glassburn and see how this might fit in to
Okay.
a larger discussion. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, Ms. Lippman, by approximation, how much 4E money do we typically get in a year?
About $1 million. Well, the last 2 years were $1 million. I don't have the chart with me. I think the year before that, it might have been less than $1 million. If you go back a couple years, I think our high was maybe 1.5, but that's off the top of my head, so don't quote that. I do have a chart that shows how much we had coming in. A portion of that goes to the county already. So there's 5% that the county just takes off the top.
And does this money come in a lump sum, or is it kind of a gradual process of reimbursement that goes on throughout the year?
It is definitely a gradual process. So, for example, the last 2 weeks, I think we just got the check for the first state fiscal quarter of 2016. So July through September, we just got that check. So it is sort of a lag, and then that's for administrative that comes quarterly, and then the maintenance checks as well. They come sort of in spits and spats.
And what would be your projection as to how much money you think there will be in the 4E fund at the end of 2016, after the things that it's planned to be spent on are spent?
If there's $2 million, I would be happy. That being said, that would make me really nervous, knowing what the court's expenses are and knowing how tight our budget is this year. I know for residential treatment alone that 1 month of invoices costs us $450,000. So if we're off by 2 months, you're talking almost $1 million right there.
And as to the $800,000 reduction in the reclaim funding, was the problem A, that they changed the formula, or was the problem B, that our numbers got worse on the items that they used to determine the formula, or is it that other counties got better?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because when this formula came into existence, and especially when the targeted reclaim program started, Cuyahoga County Juvenile Court really sort of pulled our chair up to the table and really reduced our numbers drastically. So we went from 290, almost 300 commitments a year to right now we're averaging anywhere between 95 and 105, 110 youth that are committed to the Department of Youth Services a year, and that then goes into your bed days. So we've done a really good job of keeping those numbers down. Our felony adjudications, those are what they are. This year, I think we have about just almost 800. I think it's like 798 felony adjudications. I think Franklin is the second in the state, and they're maybe at 500. So our numbers are good, and we keep doing what we need to do in this county to keep those numbers down. It's really, every time we do really well and we pat ourselves on the back, if 3 other counties do really well but better, then we lose. So it's kind of it's kind of disparaging because you can work really hard and then have a negative result.
So it's kind of an incentive where the lower you get those numbers, the more reclaim money you get.
The higher your felony adjudications, and that's based on a rolling average, and Cuyahoga is clearly much, much higher. But then it also has to do with bed day credits. So we've looked at all of the youth that were sent to the Department of Youth Services. Of those youth, generally half of those youth are there on a gun specification. They're almost probably 80% of them are felonies in the first or second degree. The ones that are less than felony 1s and 2s have probably 15 charges lined up, that they are just repeat offenders where they've gone through sort of every programming in the community. We are clearly sending the most violent youth and the youth that clearly need to go to the Department of Youth Services. We just happen to have more of those youth in Cuyahoga than in other counties. And it becomes a public safety issue. These aren't kids that you really want on the street, but you're going to add up your bed days and you're going to use more of your bed day credits. So, and then your percentage of that reclaim is going to go down.
So, getting back to my question, is the reduction due to that they changed the formula or no?
No, they didn't change the formula,
and so did we get worse, or did other counties get better?
We did. Other counties did better. We did probably about the same that we did the previous year. Other counties got better, where they're just not sending. Some of their prosecutors have some strange. They won't, like in Summit County, I don't think they even charge a youth with a gun specification unless the gun goes off. So they have other different rules and different things that they're doing in charging and what they're doing with their youth that do come in front of the judges there. And so they're using less of those bed day credits that are allocated, and so then they get a higher percentage of dollars. So I know it's something that the judges at our court are looking at very, very seriously and trying to figure out what to do. I mean, is it even worthwhile, or should we just be sending every felon to DYS and let them figure out what to do with these youth?
Okay. Well, we're
Are
going to send one of our own down to Columbus to fix these problems.
Hopefully.
all the children from Cuyahoga County?
Which ones?
The ones that we have to put on the bed days, and
Are you talking
are they
about
all Cuyahoga County residents?
the youth, the Department of Youth Services youth?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Okay, because that was kind of my thought. Is there some of those other counties that may have gotten more money? Could we not make some sort of deal to send them there, or whatever the case may be?
No, they're all Cuyahoga County residents.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Okay, anything further? Well, sounds like a larger discussion should be had. I know Judge Reaney has expressed concern regarding this, so maybe if we, after we're done here, get a date where you can bring your troops in and we can discuss this at maybe a higher level.
That would be wonderful. I think the judges would really welcome that.
Okay, hearing nothing further, because of the time I noticed, this has to go on second reading suspension. Agreed?
Yes, please.
So I'll accept a motion on resolution 2016-0040 for second reading passage under suspension.
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Against? Thank you, and wait after we'll talk. Miscellaneous business? Other public comment?
No, Mr. Chair, no one is signed in.
Thank you.